Alright guys, it's me again. Today we are going to talk about solving one-step equations with multiplying and dividing. So last week you guys learned how to solve equations when they were adding and subtracting in the problem. And these are going to be the exact same steps today for multiplying and dividing. It's just going to be different operations. So again, just like last week, the first step is going to be to circle your variable. In other words, the letter that you see in the equation, I want you to circle it because that's what we're going to solve for. That's what we want to get all by itself. Once you circle the variable, draw that line through your equal sign so you remember to keep things balanced. Again, equations have to stay balanced. Whatever you do on one side, you have to do the same thing on the other side. Then, that super important question comes up, step 3. Ask, what is happening to my variable? Last week, it was always my variable is being added to something or my variable is being subtracted from something. But this week, we're going to talk about what happens when our variable is being multiplied or divided by something. Once we figure out what is happening to our variable, we have to undo that or get rid of it. And we do that by doing the opposite. Today, when we talk about multiplication and division, they are going to be opposites and they are going to undo each other. So if my variable is being multiplied by something, I need to divide it by that same thing, and those will cancel out. Similarly, if it's being divided by something, if I multiply my variable by that same number, they'll cancel out. So let's take a look at some examples here. Again, I just repeated the steps on the left-hand side so we remember what to do. For our first example, again, I'm going to follow step 1, which says to circle the variable or the letter. So I'm going to go ahead and circle my variable, which is the letter x in this case. So I've done step 1 and cross that out. Step 2 is to draw a line through the equal sign. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a straight line down through my equal sign so I can remember to keep things balanced. Step 3, ask what is happening to my variable. Well, if I look at my variable x here, it doesn't look like there are any operations right next to it. But if you remember correctly, whenever a number and a letter are stuck together, that glue holding them together is actually multiplication. So right here, what my problem really says is -3 times x. Since my variable is being multiplied by a -3, I need to do the opposite of multiplying by -3. Since multiplication and division are opposites, that means instead of multiplying x by 3, I need to take that and divide it by -3. You need to be careful here that you don't just divide by 3, but by the whole number -3. That negative is attached to the 3 and we can't get rid of it. It's part of the number. So if I'm multiplying by -3, I have to divide by that -3 as well. But if you can look at this right, if you see this, my equation's unbalanced. So I can't just divide by -3 on one side unless I do it on the other side as well. I have to divide both sides by -3. Since multiplication and division undo each other, when I have a -3 being multiplied and then divided on the same side, they're going to cancel out. In fact, -3 divided by -3, if you type that into your calculator, you'd get the number 1. So really, this is just 1 times x. And we all know 1 times x, or 1 times anything, is just itself. So the only thing we have left on this side is x. He's my only survivor. On the right side, I just need to divide. I know this looks like a fraction, 15 over -3, but if you remember correctly, this fraction bar just means division. So this really just says 15 divided by -3. So that's what you'd put in your calculator. You could put 15 divided by -3, and you'll get the right answer. 15 divided by -3, since they're different signs, would be a negative, and 15 divided by 3 is 5. So you should get x equals -5. Just like with the problems last week, we can check our answer by plugging it back in. If I rewrote this problem, so it was -3 times -5 instead of -3 times x, it should equal 15. Well, 3 times 5 is 15, and a negative times a negative is a positive, so we did it correctly. X equals -5. Let's try another. This one I left some extra space, and you'll see why here in a second. Step 1 says to circle my variable. So I circle my letter, done. Step 2, draw a line through my equal sign to keep things balanced. Step 3, ask what is happening to my variable. Well, my variable is part of this fraction, but remember that fraction just means division. So y is being divided by -4. Since y is being divided by a -4, we have to do the opposite of division, which is multiplication. So we need to multiply this by the same thing, by -4. As you can see, that's why I left some room out here so that I can multiply it by -4. But if I multiply this side by -4, I have to do the same thing on the right side, otherwise it's unbalanced. So I have to multiply my right side by -4 as well. Just like in the last problem, when I'm multiplying and dividing something by the same number, those two are going to cancel each other out or equal the number 1. So this is really y times 1, which is just y. So y is our only survivor on the left-hand side, which is what we want. We want to solve for y. Then, if we multiply it out on the right-hand side, you can type this into your calculator, -2 times -4, or if you remember your multiplication division rules, a negative times a negative is a positive, and 2 times 4 is 8. So we should get y equals 8. Again, this is something you can check by plugging 8 back into y. 8 divided by -4 is -2. On our last slide here, we have 3 examples. I invite you to pause it here and try these on your own first before looking at the answers. Once you've done that, let's take a look at our solutions. First problem here is being multiplied by 5, so I need to divide by 5 on both sides. These 5s are going to cancel out, leaving me with just my variable x. And on the right-hand side, 10 divided by 5 is 2. If you wanted to double check that, 2 times 5 is indeed 10. The next problem here says n divided by 2 equals 8. Since it's being divided by 2, I need to multiply by 2. That is the opposite of dividing. If I multiply this side by 2, I have to do the same thing on the other side to keep things balanced. These 2's over here cancel out, leaving me with n. And 8 times 2 is 16. If you want to double check that, 16 divided by 2 is indeed 8. Our last problem here looks a little tricky. It says -b equals 12. And you might think, well, it's already done. It's already solved. That's our answer. But if you look carefully, that negative in front of the b should not be there. None of the other problems we've solved have had a negative variable equal to our answer. So b must be being multiplied by something. But what can I multiply b by that will keep it b, that'll keep it itself? Technically, b is being multiplied here by a -1. When you see the letter b by itself, you don't usually think of it as being 1 times b. But technically, if you multiply anything by 1, it stays the same. So this is really a -1b. And since it's being multiplied by a -1, we have to divide both sides by a -1 to get rid of it. As you remember, a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So that helps us get this equal to a positive b on the left-hand side. But that changes our answer on the right-hand side. 12 divided by -1, they're different signs. So we get a -12. Hopefully this makes sense. If not, be sure to raise your hand and ask me for clarification.